Okay, we are up to Mishlei 1710, and this one is another one that I used to teach a lot in high school, and so I know we're gonna get ideas. The question is how many new ideas we're gonna get, and even the standard idea is pretty good also. We'll see. One thing I'm very curious about is that there is a huge split in the translations. Okay, so maybe one of the ideas will come through weird translations. So Techas Ge'ara v'Mevin Mehakos Ksiel Mea. And right away, this is not the way I would have translated it with this BDB translation here. But anyone want to take a stab at how they would translate it? You don't have to take this into account.
What is the VB? What does that mean?
BDB is this dictionary. I always forget what it stands for. Hold on. This is the oops. This is the Brown Driver Briggs dictionary, which is a biblical dictionary that is available on Al Torah. So that's how. So that's the one that you get when you click on here. Um, okay, so the way I would translate it, and I'm openly influenced by the Art Scroll and the Mitzvah Tion in this because I think that's how I first learned it. Is actually, well, let me ask you this: anyone know what a Ga'ara is? That's also a weird word. Okay, what about a Maven?
Is that like a type of area? I don't know, I was thinking like a courtyard something, but maybe not.
No, maybe you're thinking of a Mavoy.
Maybe.
Yeah, 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 Avital or Yitzi.
I think isn't it something like I feel like I remember it because it means like the same thing in English, like a maven, someone who is really
Yeah, exactly.
knowledgeable
Yeah,
in an area.
this is one of these things that became an English word through Yiddish, I think, like a maven. Yeah. So Techas Ge'ara b'Mavin. So Ge'ara is usually let's say Ge'ara, which is rebuke. Techas, um, Techas, we'll say frightens a maven, literally understander. Okay, and you'll see the reason why I'm not translating this as understanding person. Okay, mehakos ksiel mea, more than striking a fool 100 times. Okay, so rebuke frightens and maving more than striking a fool 100 times. That's how I would translate it. And again, I think I got this from the art scroll when I first looked up the pasuk. All right, so now you see here, yeah, Avital, or you see?
Yeah, Ra, when you translate that as rebuke, is that in the constructive rebuke way, or is it like being mad at someone and criticizing them?
Okay,
Is that reflected in the meaning of the word
yeah,
itself?
so somehow in my mind, I have in my mind that Ge'ara literally means to like shout or growl at someone, and it has like a harsher connotation. I don't know where I get that from. And when I click on the BDB, it just says rebuke. It doesn't even give an etymology for it. Let me check one more dictionary here. The Klein dictionary is also very good. Sorry.
Some I remember the word vayigar coming up in
Yeah,
Tanakh,
right.
like having that meaning. I don't know. I don't remember
Yeah,
exactly.
Yigar Bo Hasatan, I think is one that people know. Yeah, see, it says here, Gara is rebuke, reproach, scolding, reprimand. See, scolding also, I feel like is a good English word for it. Like it is a rebuke, but it has like a harsh connotation. Okay, so that'll be one of our questions here. But I didn't find anyone who like talked about it in the just the normal definitions. Okay, so that's one translation. Okay, we'll add to this translation in a little while. So Metzustios says Techas is inyan pachad, the It means to frighten or to break. Okay, so frightens or breaks. Oops, breaks. Okay. Um, and he gets it from the beginning of Sefer Yehoshua, which says Al Tarot Val Techas. Okay, so if you look at Yehoshua, it says here, this is when it starts, might as well start at the beginning. Now it came to pass after the death of Moses, the servant of Hashem, that Hashem spoke to Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' minister, saying, so this is Hashem speaking to Yehoshua after Moshe's death. Moshe, my servant, is dead. Now, therefore, arise, go over this Jordan, you and all the people, to the land which I give to them, to the children of Israel. Every place that the sole of your foot shall tread upon, to you I've given it, as I spoke to Moses. From the wilderness and this Lebanon, etc., etc., etc. Going on and on and on. Okay, here we go. Chazak ve'ematz, famous statement. Be strong and of good courage. Be courageous, for you will cause this people to inherit the land which I swore to your fathers and to give them. Only be strong and be very courageous. That's chazak ve'ematz ma'od, to observe to do according to all the law that Moshe, my servant, commanded you. Turn not from it to the right or to the left, that you may have good success wherever you go. This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, famous pasuk, that you may observe to do according to all that is written in it. For then you shall make your ways prosperous, and then you shall have good successes. Okay, now here's the line. Hello, tzivisicha, did I not command you? Chazak ve'ematz, be strong and courageous. Al ta'arot, do not be frightened. Al techas, and do not be, they say dismayed here, but that's our word, techas. Because Hashem is with you in all that you will, everywhere you go. So you see from the context here, be strong and courageous. Don't be frightened and don't techas. So don't be broken, don't be afraid. And the BTB here says it's from the root chatat, which means to be shattered or dismayed, from the Assyrian chatu or terror, the Ethiopic scrutari or examinare, to be shattered, to be broken, to be dismayed. Okay, to be shattered. So this is from chatat, okay, but if you look at Mishlei, the BDB says it's from naches, which means to go down. Okay, so that's a machlokus here. Okay, the machlokus is it from chatat or nachet? Okay, so Metzus Tzion emphatically says it means to be afraid and broken. Okay, Sadigon takes a third translation. Okay, Sadigon says like this, and I'm new habit here. I'm starting to display the entire Tafsir, which is the Judeo-Arabic translation, with the notes of Rav Kafach and the Neve Shalom. So he says, To'il haga'ara mevin yoser me'akos ksil harbe. So two changes. He says, rebuke benefits the understander more than striking the fool a lot. Okay, so, and the footnote says, Tirgum techas tuja Tachiv Hagara. So he says, Ulafik Sav Yad something. So there's another translation where it says pains. So benefits or pains. So Kafach says, I don't know what the root of this word techas is according to either translation. Maybe it's a lone word. I mean, a word that like is a hapex legomenon, like a word that's only used once. And he's just explaining it by context, translating by context. Mem mehakos kumem nera lo mehem, nera l'cha yoser mehem. So it means more than. Okay, fine. And then the Neve Shalom says mea means just a lot. Okay, fine. All right, I didn't even look at the Targum. Allah ba'asa b'man demisbayin tav min mimche l'sachla me'a chutrin. Okay, so he says rebuke. Allah Allah it like goes into the understander more than striking a fool 100 times. Okay, and then the Malbim says Techas is Sharsho Naches is Inyan Yerida. Rebuke goes down into the understander. Okay. And you'll see here, these translations are reflected in our English here. Ours says chastisement. Chastisement is another good English one because it also has like a harsh connotation. Chastisement frightens an understanding one more than smiting a fool 100 times. So he goes with, article goes with frightens. Rav Hirsch says more penetrating is a rebuke to one who understands than 100 blows given a fool. Alter says rebuke comes down on a discerning man more than 100 blows on a fool. And then Peskin, who's our YouTube friend, says rebuke penetrates the understanding more deeply than does hitting the dolt 100 times. Okay, so he's a combination of what we've seen here. So let's just get all the translations in one place here. Give me 1 second. I'm just gonna make them all nice. Okay, so you've got our translation here. Actually, what I'm gonna do? Hold on. Yeah, let me just go like this. Sadia Gaon will go rebuke benefits or pains, and then we'll do Peskin. Peskin says, and Rav Hirsch says rebuke penetrates, and then we have Malbim who says rebuke and alter. Rebuke, a rebuke comes down on. Okay, so I think those are all of them. So now if I copy and paste this into the chat, then you'll have them all there. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, in fact, I'm just gonna go with the word rebuke here, and that way we could put mitsudos. 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 Okay. Those are our translations. Let me just do that one more time here. Oh, okay. So far we have the question of um that Yitzi asked, which is what is the I guess implication of the strange word ge'ara or rebuke? Okay. Seems to have a harsh connotation. I think that's the best way I can say it. What else? Yeah, Rifki?
Like the first and second half, like how do they align? Like it's just an interesting way to
Yeah,
say like the opposites are not
right.
so clear.
What is the comparison between the first and second halves? And then we'll say also like how are the two Mishleic archetypes opposites, and how are the I guess predicates, how are these predicates, what it's saying about them, opposites. And then Racheli in the chat says, what characterizes a maven? Okay, so I'm gonna say, what is the definition of a maven? And then I'm gonna also ask, what is the word that you would expect from Mishlei uh for someone who is characterized by understanding? And this is the more common word, the one that the pasuk does not use. Yeah, Yiti?
Is it a Nevon?
Yeah, between a maven and a navon. Okay. And yeah, okay, so both both of them come from the word bina, which is understanding. Okay, I'm smiling because I've got in my mind like there's a list of people who I call Mishlei babies, which are students of mine who named their kids after Mishlei learning. Okay, I've got one my former Mishlei Charusa named his kid Shlomo, and then my Talmid Chaver Isaac named their daughter Nivona, out of the Mishlei Navon. So I sent this to him saying like, oh, if you want to know what the difference is between a Maven and a Navon, then this is a good pasuk to look at. But yeah. Okay. So that is a good question here. And then we might as well ask our question. We haven't had a Ksil pasuk in a long time. What is the definition of a Ksil? In fact, I'm very curious. Hold on. I feel like Ksil is like one of the main Mishlei figures. I feel like we have not had one in a while. Last year I think we did 15. Yeah, okay. We had a lot of Ksil Pasukim last year. Actually, not. It looks like halfway through the year was last time we had. So it's been a while, and I don't think I've had any in my morning shiur yet. Oh, maybe I have. I don't know. Anyway, okay. Yeah, Yitzi.
Another question is, however we define teichas, whether it means goes down or breaks, I think under either, we'll need to explain how or like what type of breaking or going down is it, such that
Yeah.
it is doing more of that for the Geara, for the Maven, than the Hakos for the
Okay,
Ksi.
right. So let's first ask how let's say however we translate Techas, um, what does it mean here? And then um and then how does how does what is it about the rebuke or the maven that causes Techas more than um the striking of the Ksil 100 times? Yeah. Yeah, Rifki.
Yeah, my question was gonna be who is giving the rebuke?
Yeah, that's a good question also. Who is administering the rebuke? And I'm going to say and or the striking. And we'll say, does it matter? Yeah. Also, on the question of the rebuke here is likewise, does it matter what kind of rebuke we're talking about? Are there any specific qualities here? Yeah. Yeah, Ariel?
It seems a little push it.
Okay. Um, We haven't had an Ariel question in a while. Ariel question.
I could explain it if you want.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, because someone who understands, who's an understanding individual in general, like obviously rebuke is going to he's gonna adhere to the rebuke, and someone who's a fool, he's like, he's a fool. Like he may not even necessarily understand it if you hit him with it 100 times.
Okay.
It just seems a little.
Yeah, right. Okay, good. And there are a lot of psukim like this. You are right that this does seem obvious from just Mishlei. Yeah. Okay, good. Racheli in the chat says, is there any significance to the number 100 or just hyperbole? Yeah. Okay, so what significance, if any, is there in 100 times? Even if it's hyperbole, why use such hyperbole? Because again, there are other psukim that talk about corporal punishment, and it does not say 100 times. So I think it's a good question. Yeah, Yitzi.
Building off question number 8,
Yeah.
there's the question of, is the hitting and the rebuke for each person respectively being done to accomplish the same goal? And if so,
Okay,
what is
that's a good question also. Yeah. Yeah, in fact, I'm wondering if hmm. Okay, I'm gonna split that into two questions. One is, are the rebuke and striking being done for to achieve the same goal? And then the other question I want to ask here is, I'm going to mush two questions we usually ask. What is the subject of this pasuk, and what is the decision-making scenario? And we'll throw in here also, who is the audience? I'm going to put it all in one question. Again, it's funny. Sometimes I feel like these should be different questions, but sometimes I feel like they go together. I'll explain why they go together and who is the audience. Because if this is okay, the main split is this telling you advice for is this advice for the discipliner or the disciplinee? And if it's for the discipliner, is he trying to accomplish the same thing for the an understanding person and the fool? And it's telling him, don't think you can help the fool nearly as much as the maven, or is it telling him like don't hit the maven, or is it telling him don't rebuke the fool? And then if it's for the if the advice is for the recipient, so then what is it telling the recipient to do? I mean, if you're a maven, then you're going to understand the rebuke anyway. So like, why does he have to be told that? So I feel like we kind of have to tackle that question all in one. By the way, this is not a question or an important point, but the very, very first time I learned this pasuk, it was with my Ben Noah friend Sean, and he was just endlessly amused by the word Texas, because he kept on saying, "That's not how we do things in Texas." Uh, like the way that you pronounce the word Texas, the state Texas in down south, and so I cannot read this without thinking of Texas. Yeah. Anyway, now you have that in your head. Okay. Do we have all the questions here? One question on the hitting a fool 100 times is, I guess, is this saying that 100 that hitting a fool 100 times works, or that it doesn't work? Like when you first read it, it sounds like it's equating the two, but then when it says it affects the understanding person more than hitting the fool 100 times, then it opens the question, wait, does that even do anything? Does hitting the fool 100 times even work? And then that kind of also just puts a spin on Racheli's question, which is like, why 100 times? Like, is it 99 doesn't work and 100 does? Okay. I also feel like we have to ask the question, this is kind of the opposite of Ariel's question. No, you could pair it with this. I guess like likewise or alternatively, so what? Who cares? Which could be saying like, this is obvious, who cares? Or this is obvious, what am I supposed to do with it? I mean, I don't know, maybe those are the same thing. I don't know. Okay, let me start importing the questions into the chat because I think this is probably it. Yeah, Yuti.
I'm not sure if this is allowed, but I was wondering for defining the seal question, because it is something that does have somewhat more of a definitive answer.
Yeah.
If you can explain a little more about that before we go into the thinking minute.
Yeah, we could definitely do that. I can give a working definition of Ksil. So let me just though put this into the chat first. Okay, there's 1 through 6, and 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. Okay, so let's just do working definition of Ksil. Okay, so the working definition of Ksil. Actually, I'm gonna look at my Mishlei spectrum thing and see how I define it there, because I think I've changed my definition, my working definition, I mean. Oh, I forgot to make the announcement. I announced this on the chat, but for those who are listening in real time, we have a 50% discount on my Substack for paid subscription tiers, which is usually it costs $10 for a month subscription and $100 for the year. For Hanukkah only, $5 per month and $50 for the year. And I am doing this because I want to see what happens. So far it seems to be pretty good. It seems like it really was like, that my argument is like, if you ever get a coffee once a month, and then you hold the coffee in one hand and you hold all the other shiurim or articles, or recordings in the other hand, and you're like, if I pay $5 for a coffee, would I pay $5 for this to make this Torah possible? So like that's my argument. But I do understand that like $5 is an amount of money that not everyone can afford. And certainly $10. And there have been several people who reach out to me saying, thank you for reducing it to 5. Now I can actually like subscribe. But just as a reminder, like this is specifically with this shiur, the Thursday night women's shiur and the Friday morning women's shiur. Those are the shiurim I give that are not part of any institution. And the support that I get from sponsorships, from Patreon, from Substack, that is what allows me to keep on doing what I'm doing. And so if you have gained, we're at the end of the year, if you've gained value from any of the learning that I have facilitated, whether through writing or shiurim or recordings, then even a one-time $5 amount. There's one person who sends me on Chase $3 a month. And that actually makes a difference. Like these things do cost money. Like even the hosting of the podcast, like I have to pay Buzzsprout for that, and putting in the digital mastering to make it to make it like more listenable. So every dollar helps. So that's my commercial here. Now, why did I go here? Oh, for the Mishlei Spectrum thing. Okay, Mishlei Spectrum. Okay, so let's see what I wrote in 2017. Okay. So on the chart, Ksil. Interesting. So this is one difference already. Okay, so on the chart here on the screen, you see the nar is neutral, which I definitely don't agree with anymore. And orange is getting bad and red is really bad. And yellow is getting good. Green is the best of Mishlei, and then blue is like past Mishlei. Okay, so I classified the Ksil as orange. I feel like I would classify the Ksil as red now, but maybe I'm not sure. Okay, that's just my gut reaction here. Now let's see how I define the Ksil in the working definition. Ksil, I wrote like this: Ksil, one who is addicted to immediate gratification to the extent that he unconsciously expects reality to align itself with his desires. The Ksil is similar to the Evil in his superficial outlook on reality and his focus on immediate gratification. So similar, in fact, that many of the meforshim seem to regard the two as synonyms. That's still true. Okay, many times you do see them synonymously. But to my mind, there's one important difference. The Ksil has an arrogance which the Evil lacks. The Evil's resistance to Chachma, to wisdom, stems from his dim recognition that Chachma threatens his mindless pursuit of immediate gratification. In contrast, the Ksil is attached to a worldview with himself at the center. His resistance to Chachma stems from his vested interest in his egocentric worldview. Unlike the Chacham, who recognizes that he must align himself with reality to get what he wants, the Ksil expects reality to yield to his will. The difference between the Evil and the Ksil might seem minor, but it is this modicum of arrogance which allows the Ksil to develop into something worse, leftward on the Mishlei spectrum, whereas the Evil will usually remain locked in place. Furthermore, Ksil displays a degree of stubbornness and closed-mindedness which the Evil lacks. To use an analogy, if Chachma is the father The avil is the kid being dragged to the school bus kicking and screaming, whereas the ksil is the kid with crossed arms and an angry face who has firmly planted himself behind locked doors in his bedroom. Okay, I don't know if I agree with all that. So I'd say like this. I won't say that what I wrote is false, okay? But if you ask me now to define ksil, what I would say is the hardened veteran pleasure seeker. Okay. So this is someone who fell early on. Sorry, feel not someone who fell early on into the life of physical / immediate gratification and has and whose addiction has coalesced into an identity that he guards with all his psychological and intellectual power. Okay, so again, slightly different definition, but this, what I'm trying to explain here is that it's not just that he goes for immediate pleasure, it's that you're going to have to pry the immediate pleasure away from his cold, dead hands, and that's why one of the qualities of a ksil that is mentioned early on in Mishlei, I'll just read this because this is one of the first introductions to ksil in Mishlei here, is Chachma personified says, Chachmos bachutz tarona barchovos titin kola barosh homios tikra b'fiskei sha'arim ba'ir amar hatomer. So wisdoms sing out outside. In the streets she gives forth her voice. At the head of noisy gatherings and the entrances of the gates in the city, she says her words. So what does wisdom say? Ad masai pasayim te'ehavu pesi. How long will you naive simpletons love your naivete? V'leitzim latzon chamdu lahem. And scoffers covet mockery. Uksilim yisnu das. And fools hate knowledge. Okay, so that's the first. I think this is the first time it's mentioned. Yeah, this is the first mention of ksil in Mishlei. A fool is someone who hates knowledge. Now, why does the fool hate knowledge? Because I'm claiming because it threatens his pleasure-seeking ways. Okay, which is in contrast to, let's say, for the Russia hates knowledge because the Russia wants to create a worldview which fuels his rise to power and greatness, and Chachma threatens that. But the Russia does want to use Chachma as an instrument to further his own agenda. The Ksil just does not want anything that is going to threaten his pleasure seeking. Okay, and I'm going to finish reading this just to give you a fuller picture here. This is still Chachma talking. Tashuva l'tochachti, return to my rebuke. Hine abi alachem ruchi. Behold, I'm expressing to you my spirit. Odia devarai eschem, I am making known my words to you. Yan karasi vatmaenu, but because I called out and you refuse, natisi yadi ve'in makshiv, I stretched forth my hand, but no one listened. But tifru kolatasi, you rejected all of my advice. V'tochachti lo avisem, you did not desire my rebuke. Gam ani be'edachem eschach, I, Chachma, will laugh at your misfortune. Elag bavo fachtachem, I'll mock you when what you fear arrives. Bavo chashoa pachtachem, when your fear arrives like a holocaust. The edachem kesufa ye'esa, and your misfortune like a storm. Bavo alechem sara v'tuka, when distress and calamity befall you. Az yikra'unani v'lo ene, then they will call out to me, but I will not answer. Yishacharunani v'lo yimta'unani, they will seek me, but they will not find me. Tachas kisana udas, because they hated knowledge. V'yiras Hashem lo bachar, and they did not choose fear of Hashem. Lo avu latasi, they did not desire my advice. Not to kol tochachti, they rejected all my rebuke. Ve'yochlu mipri darkam, they will eat the fruit of their ways. Umimuatosem yisbal, and they'll be sated with their own schemes. Here's one more mention. Ki meshuva pesaim tahargim. I think this is a machlokas. It's either the waywardness or it is the, yeah, see, they say waywardness. There's another translation here. Hold on. Inan hashke. Yeah, the tranquility or the quietude. See, because he says shalva is tranquility. Basically, like the peace and tranquility of the simpletons will kill them, and the tranquility of the ksilim will destroy them. V'shomeli, but one who listens to me, yishkon betach, will dwell securely. V'shanan mipachad ra, and will be again quiet. This word, wrong word, undisturbed by fear of evil. So that's the first presentation in Mishlei. Yeah, so that's the hardened veteran pleasure seeker. Yeah, Yeti.
I don't mean to derail the whole shiur, but could we have maybe something similar for defining a navon?
You mean a Mavian?
Yeah, or
Or
if
Navon?
maven is its own thing,
Okay, yeah.
or if it's
Yeah,
not, it
okay.
might be a derivative of navon
Yeah,
because
yeah. So
Torah switched
I
up. Yeah.
the best still the best definition that I've seen is in Rashi on Chumash. Okay. So Rashi says on this pasuk in Devarim, I prepared it in case anyone asked. No, I prepared it because I knew I was going to have to give some definition at some point. Okay, so Devarim says, "Havu lechem anashim chachamim unvonim." This is going over when Moshe sets up the judge system. So appoint for yourself. I don't know if Havu is appointing yourself. Men who are wise, nevonim, v'yiduim l'shivtechem, and known to their tribes. Oh, sorry, this is not a point to yourself. I guess this is like ready for yourselves. For yourselves. Yeah. Selves. Men who are wise, Nivonim, and known to the tribes, and appoint them as your heads. Okay, so Rashi here says Nivonim is Nevinin Davar Mitok Davar. Now there are a lot of Chachma terms in Mishlei, like the Chacham, the Navon, the Maskil, there's no word for Das, a Das person, okay, but the Arum. So there's a lot of machlokas, but Navon is the one that they always translate as Mavin Davar Mitok Davar, those who infer or derive one thing from another, deduce, okay, one thing from another. So then it says, Zo Shashal Arios es Rabbi Yossi. So Arios, who I think was a Babylonian non-Jewish important person, asked Rabbi Yossi, Ma bein chachamim lenevonim? What is the difference between a chacham and a navon? So he answered, Chacham dome l'shulchani ashir. Rabbi Yossi answered, a chacham is like a rich money changer. Stereotypical Jewish job. Kishemevin lo dinarin liros. When they bring him money to coins to evaluate, roeh, then he evaluates them to examine. But when they don't bring him coins, Yoshe Vitoy, he sits there and twiddles his thumbs. He does nothing. I think Toa might be related to Tohu Vavohu, like nothingness. Navon, but a Navon is Doma L'Shulchani Tagar, is comparable to a merchant money changer. Kishamavin liros, when they bring him coins to examine, roeh, then he examines. Kishaimavin, but when they don't bring him business, Humachazer, maybe he goes out and brings in business on his own. Okay, so the way I understand this, again, this is my working definition, which is what you asked for, and we can interpret it differently here. I'm just going up to summarize here. So this is working definition of a navon, okay, not necessarily a maven, but related, okay, is so the way I would say it is, whereas a chacham is a dependent learner, okay, a navon is an independent learner, okay, learner. He still learns from others, but he takes what he learns and derives new insights and principles. And so Rabbi Moskowitz always called this. Rabbi Moskowitz always defined this, a navon as a creative thinker. Okay, which I see where he's coming from. I don't like saying that because when you think of creative thinker, I think in our society you think of like an artistic, like a creative, like such a creative person. He means creative thinker that he can come up with new ideas. Okay, so it is in line, I think, with my definition. But yeah. Okay, so now that we have some tools in our toolkit, I'm going to go ahead and paste these in the chat in case you want to make reference to them again. Let us have our thinking minute.
Oh, just to clarify,
sure.
so we're saying that navon is always, well, that's strong lashon, but you know what I mean,
Yeah.
like on a higher next level than a chacham.
Yeah,
Okay.
navon is head of chacham. Yeah. And by the way, you have in hold on, is it this week's parsha? Hold on, we got to do a little parsha. Oh, this is in the parsha. Yeah. Okay, this is in the parsha. There's a good Avraham and a Rambam here, which I don't think I've written on. Mikates. It's in the first Aliyah, I think. Navon. Yeah, okay. So the Ata Yere Faro Ish Navon v'chacham. So this is Yosef giving advice to Pharaoh. And now Paro, let's see how Nivi Novesky translates Navon. Now let Paro look for an insightful. Insightful is a good word also, right? You get insight, which is a new idea. You don't call someone insightful if they receive knowledge. You call them insightful if they see new knowledge. Insightful and wise man and set him over the land of Egypt. Okay, so Avraham ben Rambam points out, I think this is the Avraham ben Rambam here. Well, I highlighted it. Navon mora al mi sheyesh lo charifus koach havana v'tuv haskel. So Navon refers to someone who has sharpness of the capacity of understanding and good intelligence. Asher yirchosh lo esamada, through which he can acquire knowledge. V'chacham mora al hasagas hachacham b'foal. Chacham indicates someone who actually grasps chachma, like in actuality. Through bina you get chachma. But chachma hi tachlis habina. Chachma is the purpose or the outcome or the ultimate, the objective of bina. Lefikach hiktim navon lechacham lefishu kodem bizmanu v'seder. Therefore, no, so okay, this sounds like it's opposite of what Rivki said. Okay, but navon is comes first before chacham in time and in order. Okay, ulifamim, however. Sometimes Yihye Adam Navon, sometimes a person will be a Navon, like many of the masses who are sharp. Sometimes a person will acquire some chachma through toil and exertion, even though his understanding and his sharpness is inferior. This is how I view myself, okay? Like compared to a lot of the people in my yeshiva, then I think I happen to be very good at grasping chachma from others and presenting it, but not necessarily like the what they call a lamdan, like arriving at new like abstract creative ideas compared to a lot of the thinkers in my yeshiva here. But I work hard at it, so I get a lot of ideas from people. If you're both, then that's a perfection. All right, but then he says like this. Sometimes the word navon is used differently. And that's the one we're talking about here, which is the derivation of the conclusions of knowledge from their premises. And that's what it means in Devarim. Okay, so let me just type this out here. Okay, hold on a second here. So this is okay, I don't know how much we need to go into this, but this is Avraham. I'm sorry, this is Avraham ben Harambam. So he says, bina equals the skill, I guess like sharpness of intellect, and the ability to extract insight, whereas chachma equals the knowledge itself. Okay, and bina is a means of acquiring chachma. Okay, and then he says a chacham, based on this, a navon is lower than a chacham, but you can be one without the other. Okay, and then he says alternatively, sometimes bina refers to the ability to derive insight, whereas chachma is the did he say chachma there, or he just said I think he just said the way to derive insight. Yeah, where is the received insight. Okay, fine. Yeah, but for our purposes, I think our working definition is going to be better for this. Okay, now let's think. Okay, Ariel.
Yeah, I have two thoughts. I'm not sure if it's related,
Sure.
but
I'll listen to this too, and we'll see what happens.
but one thought is that, maybe it's just talking about an individual, interacting with a Xil or a Maven.
Okay.
Yeah, I think as someone who's a Maven, I think they'll understand, Rebuke pretty quickly. And I think if you hammer the rebuke on him, I think it'll backfire,
Yeah.
or you're just gonna be bothersome, and it's just not gonna be productive.
Yeah.
But someone who's Excel, I don't, you're never gonna get through to them. And it's almost like it's a waste of time, and it could create a lot more, you know, damage, not necessarily for them, but more for you, because you're gonna look like an idiot trying to, you know, convince the guy 100 times. It's just not
Yeah.
gonna work out. That's one thought.
Okay.
The second thought is, I think that a maven, he doesn't just recognize that this is like necessarily like a wrong thing to do or it's inappropriate or whatever, but I think he truly comprehends like why this is a bad thing to do. Like
Okay, good.
he has like a deeper knowledge and a deeper appreciation for what this thing actually is. But Axil, and I'm gonna be very harsh because I have interacted with a lot of with Axil, and I think they're no different than like an animal when where if you hit a dog or if you train a dog to not eat the food by potching him or whatever, that they're going to be reactive. They're just going to be trained to not go after the food. But I don't necessarily think they're going to truly understand why, not why eating a lot of this food constantly is very destructive to you,
Right.
or like whatever it is. Like they're just very reactive, but they don't truly comprehend what the danger actually is in
Yeah.
pursuing this.
Okay. All right, that's really good. Okay, so you're taking the stance that hitting the fool does work, but you just have to do it through repetition, right?
Yes, but it depends on what you mean by work. I'm
Right.
not.
Meaning it won't get him any understanding,
Yeah.
but it might stop the behavior, the negative behavior.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think because if you hit a child after crossing a red light, he won't do it again.
Right.
But maybe he may not recognize why crossing a red light is a problem.
Yeah. Okay, good. So I want to give an example that fits in with Ariel's second thing. I do think these are two separate and two good ideas. But I want to give an example for the second one because I think this really fits here. So the example is 3 levels of drunk driving. Okay. So the Xeal um will 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 repeatedly drive drunk, okay? Um unless you unless I'm gonna say maybe he gets arrested many times. Okay. Okay, and even that's not necessarily guaranteed. Okay, right? At which point he might stop, but doesn't really internalize why this is a bad thing. He just wants to avoid the immediate pain of the fine. Okay, and that's if you take the view that he does stop. Okay, I think you could read the pasuk and say he won't stop. Okay, now then you've got the chacham. Okay, who will accept the knowledge that drunk driving is dangerous and bad, but won't necessarily grasp the broader implications. Okay. And then you've got the maven who understands why it's bad and will extrapolate new principles. Okay. For example, don't drive when you're really angry. Don't drive when you just had a bad breakup. Okay. In other words, the chacham will be like, this is a bad thing. I saw this interview with it was juxtaposing, it was a something from the 90s. um and it was some social experiment, and they were recording like kids' moral intuitions at different stages. And so they constructed this case where basically like this guy's wife was sick, and there was this medicine, and he tried raising money and couldn't afford it. And the doctor, the scientist who made it, pharmacist who made it, or whatever, would not reduce the price. So the guy steals the thing. So they asked a bunch of kids like, was he right to steal or not? And then they asked a bunch of like teenagers, was he right to steal or not? And so the kids, again, I don't know if this was a doctored clip, but the kids all said that he was wrong to steal because stealing is bad, you know? And the older kids actually like the teenagers actually like grappled with the moral reasoning, you know? But like these kids were like, they were programmed to not steal, not through hitting, okay, but like stealing is bad and like, but they're not grasping why it's bad, you know? And if they grasp why it's bad, then maybe they would recognize that like saving a life, I mean, they would at least have the question, you know? So like I think that's that's good. Okay, anyone want to add to either of Ariel's ideas before we do a different idea? Let me comment on his first idea a little bit here also, okay, which is let me ask you this. Why do we need to be told this? Like what is the Hava Amina or mistake?
Projection.
How do you elaborate?
Yeah, because sometimes we think people think like us, and we can,
Okay.
talk to them as if we, the same way we want us to be spoken to.
Okay. So I would say there's two mistakes. There's the general mistake, and then there's things that could cause you to make it. Okay. So the general mistake is not discerning your audience. Okay. Um uh and therefore like failing to give the message in the most effective way. Okay. And then there are specific reasons why you might make that general mistake. Okay. So for example, um, projection, okay, like relating to the disciplinee, the way, you take the message. Okay. What's another thing that might cause you to like either hit when you're not supposed to hit or rebuke when you're not supposed to rebuke? Yeah, you do.
If like you're angry or aren't in control of your own
Yeah,
emotions.
exactly, right. Lack of self-control, slash like other bad mitos, as you could say, like laziness, anger, um, hatred. That's a big one. Is that sometimes that could get mixed up in things. Um, I think another one is upbringing. Okay, like there are people. I'm sure there are people who the way they were brought up is they were their parent used corporal punishment and they just automatically go to that with their kids because that's just what they think it means to punish, or the reverse is that they were brought up in a way where their parents explained everything to them and they think that like that will work on everyone because that's the only way that they know, and that's it. Actually, here's I'm gonna add another one to this. Fear of confrontation, which is an interesting one because sometimes that will lead you to refer to fall back on the blunt punishment, but sometimes that the fear of punishment, in other words, sometimes it actually evokes more fear of confrontation to actually speak to the person. So like just slapping them with a punishment is easier, but sometimes you use your words because you don't want to hurt them, and so like I think it could manifest both ways. Um, cost. Okay, and I don't mean financial cost, but I mean cost in like um time, energy. I guess that's also kind of like in the in that could fall into that music. Okay, so I think there's both these mistakes, but there's the general and then the specific, and I think you need to like think about both of them. Okay. Yeah, I think these are good ideas, Ariel. Okay, let's go with Rifki next.
Okay, so I think that mine has like kind of opposite components of both of Ariel's ideas,
Yeah,
so I guess we'll see where this
fun. Okay.
So I was thinking that like when you were explaining the definition of seal again, that the seal is like very, very, just like in the material physical world.
Yeah.
So like I think that Shlomo is bringing this example to say that like rebuke is even more powerful than like what the physical realm is for the
Ah,
seal. So
okay.
that you might think like, oh, like obviously we're material, Hashem made us as material beings, but like at the end of the day, that like this like Maven who is, a little bit more advanced, like they are beyond that. Like that the rebuke is such a strong tool, and that's where
Yeah.
like the idea of rebuke itself. Then I was thinking why? Like you were asking like, okay, like what's like the Havamina, right? And I
Yeah.
was thinking, I think with someone who's a maven as opposed to someone who, even a chacham, if we're going by the definition that a chacham is on a lower level, we might not think like, oh, like, that person needs to get X rebuke for whatever reason. And so this is coming to say, like, no, like in reality, that if you if that person needs rebuke in whatever mida they have, that could be even stronger than, hitting a fool 100 times, which I think is strong. Like I think that that is a strong way of going about it.
Okay, so the audience here is who? Is this the person giving the discipline?
Yeah.
Okay, and I'm missing a step here. So what is the mistake that the person might make in a situation that so they're in a situation that someone warrants discipline? What might they think?
So specifically for the Maven, so
Yeah.
that's what I'm concentrating on is that because they're on a higher level, that they might not need rebuke. Because if they understand, meaning almost going off of Arya's idea of saying like, oh,
Okay.
they understand, that's literally what the name is, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm saying that that's the mistake. It's like just
Okay.
because someone might have a good understanding of the world, like they still, it's very hard to be objective all the time about yourself and your midos, and you still need, someone to give you that rebuke.
Okay, they still need it. And it can have a huge effect. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I'll definitely say that I um there are definitely times with not so much my high school students, but with my, I mean, it's happened with high school students before. It's usually more with my students who are in, like young adulthood, that like it's not really my way personality wise or teaching style wise to give unsolicited advice. Um, and but there are and especially with my Mishlei students, I feel like there is this, I do tell myself that of like they're probably already thinking about this, you know. But then I do think to myself, like, maybe like what's the trade-off? Maybe I should say something, even though it makes me feel uncomfortable to give unsolicited advice. That what's the worst that can happen? The worst that can happen, well, I guess the worst that can happen is that they get angry and offended or whatever. But I don't think I'm going to give it in that way. Usually, the worst that can happen is they say thanks and they either already knew it or they ignore it, but there's no harm done. But then the best that can happen is it wasn't on their radar, or they were rationalizing like making the mistake and like hearing it either from me like ethos wise, or if I hit a certain emotion, or if I present the argument in a clearer way, it can have a huge effect that can like save them from making a bad decision. So like I do need to hear this I think because of my disposition to tend to not want to like interfere like in again because my upbringing from Rabbi Moskowitz, Rabbi Moskowitz um only ever gave me advice once, like unsolicited. And that was the advice that he thought that I was making the wrong decision about which yeshiva to go to. Um, and you have to understand this is not his way. Like his whole way of giving advice was just helping you think through the two options and then not making you decide. But he did pull me out of class in 12th grade and and you know, tell me that he thinks that I am making a decision, blinded by certain emotions, and that it would be for my benefit developmentally to go to the yeshiva I went to, and that decision on his part changed the course of history for me in my life, at least. So yeah, so that's a good application here, Rifki. Okay, Avital Yeti, whichever of you raise your hand, I missed it.
Yeah, I don't know if it's like a fully thought out idea, but it was more like I feel like when we talk about positive rebuke, we speak more about tochacha, and you were talking about how this has like a little bit
Oh yeah, I
more
forgot about that. I forgot to think about that.
an
Yeah,
intense like connotation, and then
yeah,
also obviously like hitting a seal 100 times is also like a very intense form of whatever you want to call that punishment. Like it depends what the context is, I guess.
Yeah.
But with that, I think that neither one are really like, let's say with the seal hitting them 100 times, like you might force a change in behavior due to like fear, let's say, or because of like a more negative like connotation kind of, or not negative connotation, but 1 second, sorry. But just like something very negative because of the whole experience. It's not like something you're running to. It's just totally negative.
Mhm.
But then the thing is with giving like harsh rebuke, especially in this case, I think it seems clear, like you don't wanna, whatever you're rebuking Maven for, there's like the goal isn't or shouldn't be, I don't think, that you want to frighten or break them. Like if you want to cause something like kind of positive, like they're both ways that are causing responses, but then like in practicality, let's say for the person who's doing the rebuking, whether it's like the hitting or the I don't know what the positive advice in that way is to do, but just something to think about is like these might have certain results, some of which might lead to consequences that you wanted. Let's say whatever the fool was doing that he's not supposed to be doing, probably won't do it again after being hit 100 times.
Yeah.
Whatever the whatever the Maven is doing that he's being rebuked for and broken by, okay, he might keep quiet to himself, or he might not say that idea they don't like, but I don't think ultimately whoever's working with them
Okay.
is going to benefit or achieve really what they want to out of this.
Okay. Okay. I think I see where you're going with this. This is a good idea. So in other words, let me just try to put this into possible possible, I guess, fleshing out of the idea. Tell me if this is where you're going. So in other words, um, so I'd say this pasuk is warning the disciplinarian that even if they succeed in getting the results, whether by uh harshly rebuking a maven or by hitting a seal, okay, there are secondary consequences that are either inherently undesirable or that should at least be weighed before you use that method. Okay, like I'll give you an example of this. I always forget here. Okay, so you've got the Rav, right? Rabbi Joseph B. Soloveitchik. Okay, and he was the son of Rav Moshe Soloveitchik. Where is this here? Moshe Soloveitchik. And people know the Rav's younger brother, Rav Aaron Soloveitchik, okay, but they tend to not. Hold on a second. The Rav was born in. I'm gonna get the ages straight here. The Rav was born in 1903, okay, and there was another brother, Samuel Soloveitchik, okay, which people don't know about. All right. And he was a chemistry teacher at YU. Okay. So people know the Rav and they know Rav Aram. They don't know Samuel Soloveitchik. Okay. So I heard this story that that I don't have confirmation of this. But like the Rav that the way I heard it, and someone could correct me on the if they listen to the recording and I got the story wrong, is that someone asked the Rav, like, you became this great Talmud Chacham, and like your youngest brother became a great Talmud Chacham. What happened to your middle brother? It sounds kind of like a harsh question to ask. I don't know if they asked it in a nicer way. And so the Rav said, in our household, not only were we expected to know the answer and to give a good svara, to give a good theory, but we were expected to express it with the absolute clarity. And like, if it was an idea that could be expressed in 5 words, but you gave it in 6 words, you get a potch. And if you get it, you got it said in 4 words, you get a potch. And my brother couldn't take the potches. That was the line, you know. And so did his father, again, assuming the story is true, again, this is what I heard, assuming his father got the results and like got the middle brother to like, learn, it had this other effect that like maybe turned him off from learning or turned him off, stunted his growth or whatever it is. That's the kind of thing, whether or not this is true, that's the kind of thing that I think this is warning about. Before I call on Racheli, Avital, is this the direction that you were going or a different direction?
A little bit. I think it is a little bit similar, and I was also thinking with my students. I also was thinking of my students
Yeah,
how like some of their parents come or like have a culture of like you have to get a 99 otherwise, or you
right,
have to get 100 otherwise, where do those 2 points go, you know?
right.
And like instead of creating a system where they're like, oh my gosh, I love learning and I just really want to do so well to like
Yeah,
make myself and my parents proud, it's more like, all right, I got a 96. I guess I'm done for the night. I'm going to be yelled
yeah,
at and I'm not going to want to
yeah,
show them. And it
yeah,
just creates like a lot of hiding from their parents and a lot of nervousness around them.
right.
Um,
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good example. Yeah,
yeah.
another example. I'm just going to put this here. Another example is um, instilling high standards in your kids and making the perfect the enemy of the good.
Like even yelling at your kids, I think is enough to
Yeah,
make them, okay, fine. So I just won't tell you anything because you could just
exactly.
yell.
Right, right. Yeah. And as in other parenting mistakes. Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, Rachel, you have something to add to this? Or you have a third approach? I mean, not third approach, different approach.
I have another idea.
Okay, sure. Why don't you say your other idea? I want to come back to this, but I know you might have to go. So go
Sure.
ahead.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So my idea is that this is advice to someone who is looking to discipline or even like reform something, some system or some group or whatever. And it's kind of advising the discipliner to look at the I guess character of the people they're dealing with and to try first to uplift the group to all be basically mavens. I don't know how you say that in
Yeah.
plural. Because when you're trying to affect change, if you're dealing with a group of people who even, 100 lashes or whatever has no effect, then you're just going to be wasting so much effort and energy. And if you first raise the level of the playing field, whatever, I'm not articulating this perfectly, but then
Yeah.
you have a much easier time.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's really good. Yeah. Which is much more effective than using the other,
Yeah. So also just to like maybe summarize, like I think
yeah.
the advice really is before focusing on rebuke or before focusing on like on the bad behavior or whatever you're trying to fix, help the people you're working with become understanders, so to speak.
Yeah, okay. I got a really good and weird example of this. Okay. So I've said this many times, my two most influential teachers in making me the teacher who I am are Rabbi Moskowitz and then my middle school band teacher, Mrs. Scott. So Mrs. Scott was a was ex-military and she was Eskimo and she was very militaristic in the way she ran her middle school band. But it was tough love. And what she did effectively was making us hold ourselves to a much, much, much higher standard than the other middle school bands. And so I remember when we used to, she used to do like drill sergeant routines with us, and we would be, and we when we would march in these parades, these other middle schoolers would be like kids, running around, not in lines, not at attention, not like doing the stuff. And their music was worse, and their decor was worse. And like we were at much higher standards. And so I can imagine those teachers, I don't know what went on in those schools. I can imagine those teachers needing to like yell at their sixth and seventh graders as if they're seventh and sixth graders. Whereas with us, she held us to the standards of like high schoolers or like adults and raised the level to the point where we didn't want to misbehave. And one look from her or one like, order or command would get us to this professional caliber, And when you think about it, like you're saying, it's like it took work on her part to get us to that point, but it's a lot better than just going around and like punishing kids for like disobeying and running around like crazy, Yeah, Rachel?
This reminds me of a story I once heard. I have no idea if it's true or not,
Yeah.
but it was like someone speaking about how they went to like, it was also very idealistic. I don't know if this like actually happens, but someone is speaking about they went to like an Orthodox Jewish Shabbos table and like a kid misbehaved, and like the discipline that this kid got for misbehaving was that they like couldn't help do the dishes at the end of the meal or whatever, or something, like they couldn't help clean up. And that's like, in most families, that's
Yeah.
not at all discipline because they're like not on that level. But
Right.
the way that this family raised their kids, it was like, yeah. So
Yeah, that's a good example. Yeah, that's a good example. Before I go back to Yitzi, I just want to I had another thought about Avital's idea. So I agree with Avital's idea about how the pasuk is highlighting like the negative edge of these two types of discipline can have ill effects. Okay. I wonder if you could also apply the Ga'ara thing to Rivki's idea, okay, which is, let's just say Ga'ara connotation, okay, which is that sometimes a tochacha isn't enough, isn't enough for a maven. You need a Ga'ara, okay, i.e. substantive rebuke with the proper emotional or like rhetorical edge to scare them. In other words, I think there is a feeling sometimes when you're dealing with someone who's highly intelligent that like I could just get to them with logic alone, and in reality, like we're all human beings and rhetoric works for a reason where ethos is the most powerful, pathos is second, and the logos is the last. And like sometimes you do need to like scare someone a little bit. Like again, I'm thinking about like thankfully these last couple years, a lot of my students have gone into teaching, and there was a student of mine who I urged him to think about how he's going to set up his class before the school year started. You know, don't just try to wing it, and like he was inclined by disposition to just wing it, and I had to like scare him a little bit about how you are gonna cause yourself so much pain if you just try to wing it and then come up with a system later, And I had to. I'm not gonna say how I like, had to like, I had to. Let's just say I had to like frame it in a sort of like scaring you straight type of way. Yeah, yeah, Rookie.
Yeah, I was gonna say like the same thing, like not the same thing, but when
Yeah,
Avital was starting to say her idea, I think that like the first half can like work very well with it. Like I was thinking with like the women I learn with, like
yeah,
there are some people you interact with where you're like you just know that you have to take like a different approach. Like I don't want to say
yeah,
that other people are stupid, but like
yeah.
whatever, like you
Yeah, it does not correlate
obviously,
with intelligence either. This
yeah.
is like, yeah, right. Yeah, we talk.
Just in terms of like the example that you
Yeah,
just gave, every year that I've been in the school, there's always a new teacher in the morning for the Hebrew. And
yeah,
I always debate whether I should tell them or not tell them what to
yeah,
expect. And it's usually like we come in like, let's say a week before just to set up the classroom,
yeah.
and you see like this glint in their eye, and they're setting up the pictures and rainbows on the walls and different little charts they're gonna have. I'm like, that's very cute. Have you taught before? No, this is my first time. And you're like,
Yep,
okay, well, I'm excited for you. Let me know when you need help. And if you need tissues, I'm here.
yep,
Like,
yep, yep. Exactly.
yeah.
Okay. Any other approaches before we go to the meforshim?
Yeah, I just wanted to add number one is the story about the Soloveitchik brothers.
Yeah.
There's a book written by one of the Soloveitchik sisters that I remember there being like a section about that thing in particular,
Oh, okay.
about the three brothers and how.
Yeah. Okay. If
And,
you come across it, let me know, show me because I don't think I've seen that book.
okay.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so that's just
Okay.
one.
Good. Good. All right. Okay. So before we go to the meforshim, I just want to read. I do have again. So these are the pasukim from my first years of teaching Mishlei. I do have a 4 sentence summary that I came up with from my notes, which is probably going to overlap with what Ariel said, I think. The Ksil sense of reality is rooted in the immediate and the particular. His decision-making is entirely governed by instant gratification and avoidance of immediate pain. As such, the only way to alter his behavior is by artificially imposing immediate consequences and conditioning him like an animal until his behavior eventually changes. The Mavian sense of reality, on the other hand, is rooted in his understanding of the underlying systems of cause and effect. Thus, even a verbal rebuke will be real to him and affect his emotions and behavior. Very similar to Ariel. Okay. And while we're down here, Peskin in his commentary wrote, the way to get through to someone who has the desire and ability to understand is through words. In contrast, one who knows right from wrong but still acts foolishly due to their passions ought to be corrected with violence. I don't think he means like actually like harming them. I think he means like, hitting them. However, it is still more effective to use words on the former than violence on the latter, meaning that the effect is still going to be better. I think for the reasons we said, which is that whenever you punish someone with an artificially imposed punishment, it's only going to deter them as long as the threat of the punishment is there, but if the threat's not there anymore, there's nothing to stop them. Whereas if you show them why the thing itself is harmful, then you don't need to be there as their disciplinarian anymore. So it's going to affect them even more. Okay. Let's do Metzudas David and then Rabbeinu Yonah, and then we'll see what time we're at and maybe call it a night. Okay, Metzudas David. I think maybe I got my idea from Metzudas David, but we'll see. All right, Metzudas David says, Ge'aras hamochiach hi matelas ema b'lev hamevin yoser mimashiach radaksil im yuka makos. Okay, that's basically what we said. So the disciplinarian's rebuke instills fear into the heart of the maven more than the ksil is afraid of being hit 100 times. I think that just fits into any of the ideas that we've said, either that the ideas are more real than the physical, or it's more intrinsic. He realized the actual harm of the thing that you're trying to warn him away from. I don't think there's any new ideas here other than what we've covered. Yeah, Avital?
Just one thing I think that the Mitsuda stuff is bringing out is im yuka me'amakos. It means if he was already hit 100 times. So
Oh, that is a good
maybe like
point.
a chiddush here is that once you've already hit him, then the fear wears off. There's no more hits coming unless he gets caught again. But for the maven, when you give him the rebuke, that fear lingers on past the
Okay.
point where the rebuke was actually given.
Okay, that's a good point. Insight from Yitzi, which is the ksil has already been hit 100 times, and even still, there's a chance it'll wear off. Whereas the rebuke of the Mavian is permanent, because he understands why the behavior or decision is harmful. Yeah. Okay, let's do Rabbeinu Yonah. So first thing Rabbeinu Yonah does is he explains the word haches milas techas haisa ru'uya lehidagesh. Okay, I'm not going to understand all the details here. So the ches is supposed to have it should have had a dot in it. Lavo b'shekel teka b'shrasha naches v'hu lashon yerida. So he's learning it means to go down. V'hinachta alai yadecha v'targam v'yirad v'nechas or v'naches. V'hinan terid ge'ara v'tishkon b'levamim. So the way he's translating it is a rebuke is internalized, we would say. I don't think we use the word descending, but internalized by the Mavian, etc. Okay, fine. So now he explains the pasuk. Inyan Mavian, so this is where he defines the difference. He says the definition of Mavian is ha'isha chavetz lahavin hadvarim yishma, is a person who desires to understand the statements he hears. V'gam lo levav lahavinam, and he has a mind that's capable of understanding. Okay, to understanding them. Ki beheder mimeno achas mishtei ele lo yikari mevin. For without, or I guess for if he is lacking either of these traits, he cannot be called a maven. V'chein es pnei mevin chachma v'dal mevin yichakrenu. Okay, he gives two inyanim kulon b'yarnu. Okay, he gives two proofs from Mishlei for this. Lashon mevin eneno inyan echad im lashon navon. Okay, the concept of mevin is not synonymous with navon. Ki hanavon, for a navon, shem hatoar is an adjective lahasagas ha'adam b'malas habina, for someone who has attained the virtue or the level of bina. Ki koneh chachma tchila v'hisig lahavin ba davar mitoch davar, for he has acquired chachma first and attained the ability to understand one matter from another. Alkain lo yitztarach hanavon lagara. Therefore, the navon. I just started a new document. I did not mean to do that. Hold on. Therefore, the navon does not need rebuke. Kasher kasuv, as it is written, v'hochach lenavon yavin da'as. Let me just read that full pasuk, 1925. 1925. Late take ofesi yarim v'hochiach lenavon yavin da'as. That's weird. It sounds like he does need knowledge. Let me just see what the Ravina Yonah says on that. The translation here is if you strike a scoffer, a pesi will become clever, and one who rebukes a navon will understand knowledge. So he says, Lo me'asher tochicheno bilvad yusar, yivaser, not only someone who rebukes him, not only will one who rebukes him, he's hard to Allah. Yavi masav yichapis drachav v'yachor bir oso ki nichshal b'davar acher v'yira lenavsho ula yikrehu avonu michshal kamo kain b'davar mechem. Okay, so that's kind of like what I was saying actually. So it's, in other words, he's saying when you rebuke a navo, not only will he improve in the area that you rebuked him, he'll use that rebuke and he'll gain self-knowledge and improve in other ways beyond what you told him. So in other words, he's benefiting in a higher level. Okay, yeah, all right. So that's what he's saying here. And then he says, "Mehakos ksil mea," then striking a ksil 100 times. Haksil eno ohev lishmoa darche habina. The ksil does not love listening to the ways of bina. Rak lamalas tavaso. Sorry, only the ksil only loves understanding. Oh, sorry, listening to the ways of bina, for the sake of satisfying his own lusts. Kasher kasuv, as it is written, is the very first pasuk I taught in Mishlei in YBT. Lo yachpot ksil betvuna ki im bizgalos libo. The ksil only desires understanding, I think, for the sake of literally, he only desires understanding in exposing his own heart. But I need to see how the Rebbeinu Yonah learned it. When the ksil speaks in chachma, he does not desire to understand and know the truth. Only to glorify himself and to reveal the depth of his mind and his thoughts. Okay, so that's slightly different than Rebbeinu Yonah is saying here. Of revealing his heart. Okay, actually showing off is how he's saying it, of showing himself off. Okay, that's Mishlei 18:2. V'hu hevach min maven. He is the opposite of a maven. Al kain, therefore, ein takanas bagara. A rebuke cannot fix him. Ah hamakos haruyos alav. Only the smitings, the beatings that are befitting of him. The Amru Machabri Hamusar, the ethical authors said, "In takana lenevalim ki im b'hachna'u b'zayon." The only way to fix scoundrels is through subduing them and shaming them. Okay, so just to summarize here, okay, there are three levels being talked about here. Okay, so there's three levels. So Ksiel is will not be improved by rebuke, but only by beating him physically or socially, right? That's the shame. Okay. Then you've got the Mavian is one who desires to understand and is capable will benefit will benefit from rebuke. And in the Navon, one who is on has acquired the level of Bina will not even need rebuke in the particulars. His only use, not his only use for rebuke, he will relate to rebuke as a window into greater self-knowledge to improve himself beyond the specifics. So those are the three levels. Yeah. Oh, thank you for posting the link. I actually have a connection in the Stern library, and he can make a PDF for me. And when he does, I'll post it in the chat. Not PDF of the whole book. I'm saying a PDF of that chapter. You just copy this here because otherwise I'm going to lose the chat. Okay. Yeah. All right. Thank you. Okay. So the question is like, what's the main idea here? I mean, these are nice small ideas about, or not small ideas, particular ideas about the three levels here. But I guess what I'm wondering here is, what is the main idea, and why specifically focus on the Maven? Like I think if Shlomo had said Navon, I think we would have arrived at the same ideas, But Rabbeinu Yonah makes a big deal about how the Maven is different from the Navon, and how you wouldn't have needed to say that he needs the rebuke. So like what is the idea here?
Sorry, I didn't understand the question.
The question is, Rabbeinu Yonah says there's a difference between the Maven and the Navon, and he makes that into a big deal. Like that's mostly what he's writing about here. And he even goes and he says that the Navon does not need rebuke at all. Okay, so I'm just asking, like, if we had just seen this pasuk and it said Navon, I think we would have come up with all the same ideas we did. So apparently Rabbeinu Yonah is like picking up on something that we're not picking up on. So what is the main idea with that nuance? Like why specifically on the Maven? What do we get from seeing the Maven contrasted to the Ksiel as opposed to the Navon being contrasted with the Ksiel? Yeah, Yitzi?
I'm wondering if right now, like if the Rabbeinu Yonah isn't talking about, let's say, the difference between a person, intellectually understanding something and emotionally, like it resonating and taking it to heart, but just in
Yeah,
terms of being able to understand the idea and then implementing it and
yeah,
being able to have that sort of worldview. So maybe what the idea is that this middle level exists, meaning you might think that you either have somebody who's incapable of approaching things intellectually, and like the only thing that will be effective is a carrot and stick type of rebuke methodology, or you have somebody who's wise and he'll like rebuke also won't be effective in that and for that person because they already have an understanding of the way things are. But the thing is that no, there's a person who's somewhere in the middle. How their understanding isn't perfect and they're making their way up, but I kind of related to other ideas that people were saying that the ideal in that case isn't to go for hitting, but is to go for the rebuke.
Okay, so that's interesting then. Yeah, and so this middle level exists, and what this person needs is the rebuke. Not the hitting. And I'm gonna say, see, for me, it's not the Havamina is not that you should hit this person. It's that it's not the hitting. Let me say my take is the Hava Amina is that you should classify this person as a Nava, okay, who doesn't need the rebuke and can figure it out on his own through his self-knowledge. Okay. And I think this gets into the examples that I gave earlier of like, I do think that I make this mistake sometimes where I see someone who is very intelligent and they want to understand, and I tell myself I don't need to give them this constructive criticism because they'll figure it out on their own. And he's saying no, there is don't that a Navon might figure it out on their own, unprompted, but a Maven is capable of. It's true they're capable of understanding and they're capable of deriving this, but they need it to be pointed out through the Ga'ara. Now, Yitzi's advantage here is I'm neglecting the second half of the pasuk, so that's why like I feel like I'm missing something. Yeah, Yitzi.
Maybe there's also an element that what of the Rabbeinu Yonah's idea that because he's a maven and not a navon, that's why Ge'ara is necessary. That's why you need some of the scare
Right.
tactics.
Okay. And perhaps since he's a maven and not a navon, it needs to be Ge'ara with some emotional component rather than a purely abstract tochacha. And that might be why, even though he's not translating techas as fear, but in like descent, like going, like I feel like Mishlei does use the word descending as like an emotionally affecting the person, whereas like the Navon can just totally get from the abstract ideas. He doesn't need to reach his emotions in order to be able to like use it to work on himself. And yeah, he'll work on his emotions, but it doesn't need to make any emotional impact. But the maybe needs a Gara that has some sort of emotional component to it. So yeah, I think that's good. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Anything else?
You just want one other thing that maybe
Yeah.
like there's two ways of phrasing the like that idea. One is that for the Navon, intellectually is enough and you don't need to impact it on the emotional level. The other way to say it is that because he's on this high level, there is a wide, highway attaching his emotional reality and his intellectual reality. So when it's gonna make sense to him on the intellectual level, it's automatically going to transfer to the emotional without
Right.
any extra element needing to be thrown in.
Okay. Level will automatically translate to the emotional affect. Yeah. That is definitely possible. This is one question that to me is an open question because the way our last understanding of the Yashar or the Yosher in Mishlei sounds more like that, where it's focusing on the perfection of having your emotions in line with your intellect with that free flowing thing. Whereas I don't know what the emotional life of the Navon is like. I think based on these categories, it's totally reasonable what you're saying. I just would have to do more of a survey. Yeah. Okay. Did you have something else? No, okay. All right. Let's I think that's actually a good place to stop for today. So let's just do a quick review. I'm happy with what we got though. Okay, so our ideas are as follows. We had Ariel's first idea, which is an idea about giving tochacha, which is know your audience, know that different audiences require different strategies, and it's really giving the full spectrum. It's giving the spectrum of treat them like an animal, treat them like a human, and then there's stuff in between. And why do you need to be told this? Because you might just not be thinking about it, or you might have some predisposition to giving a specific type of thing, either giving Ge'ara to the Ksil or giving Haka'ah to the Maven. And both of those are bad. Our second idea and my idea are that the only way to change the Ksil's behavior is through immediate artificial punishment because he's not going to understand anything. And even that's not going to necessarily stick or work. It might just stop the behavior. The Chacham can then see the immediate consequences of the idea that you told, sorry, the long-term consequences within the rebuke that you told him, but he's not going to extrapolate on his own. But then the Mavian can extrapolate to other ideas. And then now we can put it in Rabbeinu Yonah. The Navon won't only extrapolate to other ideas, but will use it to gain self-knowledge. So let's just put this here. Okay, Navon is using, like we'll take this rebuke about how he's prone to unsafe driving when he's in an emotional state and use that as a springboard for deep introspection and knowledge about how his emotions cloud his thinking in all areas. Okay, so that's like total expansiveness. Yeah. Okay, that's Ariel's idea and my idea. And then we've got Rivki's idea, which is that the power of the world of ideas to a thinker is greater than the power of the physical to someone who's like an animal, basically. And the application um, is that you might think that you don't need to do this, but you really do. And I added that you might even need the emotional component of the Gaara. Avital's idea is that you have to be wary of the secondary emotional effects of whatever type of discipline you give them, that even if it works, quote unquote, in terms of achieving your goal, you might be instilling other bad consequences or effects or mitos, and you have to worry about that. And it does not differentiate between hitting a seal and scolding a maven. Like it could have equally. I'm going to actually put that here. Is that the effects could be equally devastating for the maven as they are for the seal. Okay, or even worse. Like in fact, you could argue that if you mess them up psychologically, that's worse than getting physically beaten, in terms of how it affects their personality. And Racheli's idea was that helping craft your group with group discipline or even with individual discipline to the level of a maven will make it much easier for you as the disciplinarian than to work with them on the lowest common denominator. Then the Mitsudas David's idea, as explained by Yitzi, was that the reason why it is instilled more is because it actually is instilled, whereas hitting them 100 times might not stop the 101st violation. Like it might just if the threat goes away, so it's not actually going to be instilled at all. And then Rabbeinu Yonah's idea is that there are these three levels: Ksil, Maven, and Navon, and that note the Maven. The Maven is at their own level, and don't think that they can just get it from the ideas, and don't think that they don't need the rebuke at all, and certainly don't think that you should hit them. Okay, we accomplished my goal of getting new ideas from this pasuk that I've taught many times. I liked it. Okay, good idea. FYI, next week we are scheduled to have shiur, and I'm going to do another what do you call it? I know it's like the last, well, I guess before shiur is the last night of Hanukkah, right? But is that right? Or is that last night? Whatever. But I'll ask around to make sure that there are enough people for shiur, but I'm fine giving shiur. The 29th, I will be hopefully in my cabin and off the grid. So no shiur on the 29th. Okay. Have a happy Hanukkah, everyone. Thanks for coming. I'm glad we had a shiur
Happy
tonight.
Hanukkah. Thank you.
All right.